Have you ever stumbled on something as an editor and you thought to yourself, I cannot believe I am just learning this today? Well, I've been editing for over 20 years, so that's happened to me more times than I can count. So consider this a public service announcement. If you learn this stuff now, you'll be way far ahead of me. And to list these things, I'm bringing on my main collaborator of the past 20 years because we learned a lot of these things together on projects like this, and this, and this. I want to welcome veteran commercial director Scott Rice.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for coming on, Scott. I thought we would talk about one of my favorite things that I just feel like I'm really getting into the groove with way later into my career, and I wish I would have started much sooner. And it's the power of a paper edit, or I think a broader way to put it would be editing away from the computer. So I'm going to let you start.
Yeah, I think it's smart. I think it's very freeing because when you're in front of the computer, you feel this pressure to execute, to get a result. And when you're in front of a piece of paper, you're just kind of dreaming something up. You're coming up with solutions, but you're not doing the result. You're not trying to find the result right there. You're just playing, you're experimenting. And I found it very freeing because, you can think a lot faster when you're just in front of the piece of paper trying things out. When you're trying things out on the timeline, you get hung up on, is it this frame or that frame, or is that sound not right? Maybe I need to change that. Oh, I need to fix the music edit now. But when you're on paper, it's really just theoretical, and it's very exploratory. And there's some things you really just can't do in the software instantly, like figure out the entire structure of a piece, whether it be a documentary or a narrative, a short film or a feature or whatever. So I really like, particularly with documentary work, I like to, after the shoot, type up a paper edit, a basic scene structure for the whole piece, and give it to the editor and say, well, just so you're not, you're not staring at a blank screen, here's kind of a broad structural approach that I thought of based on what I think we got. And that's very useful to the editor, and it's useful to me because, again, that just wouldn't exist if those ideas wouldn't exist if they weren't put to paper. You can't just snap your finger and have them in Premiere or whatever software you're working in. So I really
bless you, Scott. I gotta jump in and say every editor watching this is so jealous of me that I get to work with a director who actually delivers a story structure for a doc shoot. Yes, I am very spoiled, everybody.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Austen, because not every director does. I've worked with editors who say, man, I just get handed 5 hours of footage and the director's like, good luck.
Yeah.
But there's something about creating that paper edit that is a starting place. It's the beginning of the conversation. What should this be? What is the third act? What is the climax? What are the turning points? And then you can also do that with scenes. And Austen, you and I do that a lot where you can talk about it more. Sometimes you actually choose to send me a paper edit rather than sending me a cut. Talk about why you decide to do that.
Yeah, well, I added this paper edit to this list of 5 things I'd wish I had done sooner because recently we were working on a project together, and this had particular challenges because I wasn't on set. I do like to go to set when I can. So I got this footage, and the problem was this commercial had a 3D animated main character. So I'm getting this footage, and I kind of understand what's going on. But I could have taken one route, which is my usual route. I'll just kind of take my best guess, put together a rough cut as best I can, send it to Scott, and then he'll set me straight. And I said, you know what? Because I'm not super clear on what shots this 3D animated guy is going to be in, I'm going to do a paper edit. And I like to do it in a piece of software called Milanote, which you might be familiar with it. It's basically you can put in little bits of text and images, and you can move stuff around so easily. So I'm disconnected from my software. I'm in kind of this playground, like this blank canvas. I bring in my thumbnails, so I take quick screenshots of all the setups, and then I put in the script. Mind you, this was a 15 to 30-second commercial, so not too much, maybe like 6 or 7 shots, the end art card. And I noticed like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. So I'm like playing, and I'm even coming up with ideas beyond just kind of asking Scott, hey, is this a good structure to start with? I'm kind of getting some ideas like, ooh, what if we switch these 2 shots around? Ooh, we got this juicy close up here. I kind of want to put that as an option. So I'm kind of stacking some stuff next to each other. Like, ooh, definitely want to do an A and a B cut. And so then I export it as a PDF. I send it to Scott. He looks at it. We hop on the phone, have this cool creative brainstorm. I remember, Scott, you said, oh, okay, Austin, yeah, we are going to have the 3D animated dollar bill. He is actually going to fall off screen in the middle of this shot, for instance. And I'm like, okay, so I did not understand that. I'm so glad we did this.
Right.
30 minutes later, and then I have another draft with Scott's notes where I'm rearranging stuff as he's talking. And we get off the phone and I'm like, oh my gosh, I should do this for everything I ever edit. I probably saved myself a day, or probably saved myself a half day of messing around in the timeline when, gosh, it's so great for collaboration, you know?
Yeah, and efficiencies. I mean, that efficiency is great because you grind yourself down. That half a day you saved yourself. It's not just the time. It's also just like, oh, it's kind of tiring. Let's say you misunderstood something. You sent me a cut, and it's discouraging when you worked on something for a half a day, and I'm like, no, that doesn't work because here's this invisible character. He's actually going to fall here or whatever, and then that changes your whole perception of it. So I love that it's a great, efficient way to communicate with your director, for example, without burning a lot of time. It's also just, the way I use paper edits is, you're editing, but you're not in front of your computer. Like, let's say you're on a walk.
Yes.
Let's say I'm on a jog or I'm on a bike ride and I come up with an idea because I'm always thinking about, sometimes I edit in my sleep. And my gosh, I wake up and I have an idea.
You're a true freak.
I just, right. I never let it go. Partly because it's fun. And, sometimes you have ideas when you're not in front of your computer, but you need to write them down. And I'll just write it. I'll send myself an email. I'll write it in a note on my phone, or I'll just type it up in Word on my computer if I'm not in front of the software. And I'm not, because Austen is in front of the software. I'm usually not. I usually don't touch it. So it's just a great way to jot down those kind of moments of inspiration that you have when you're not in the thick of it. And sometimes your best ideas are when you're just getting a breath of fresh air, or you're taking a shower, and not when you're sitting there beating your head against the screen trying to come up with all the solutions.
Oh my gosh, it is so true. And this illustrates one of my favorite points that I always want to hit home. Editing is not software. This is proof that editing is not getting better at DaVinci or Premiere Pro or whatever you're using. It's about storytelling. And that's why we can edit away from our computers. And like Scott said, oh my gosh, so many times I have a special notes part of my phone that I can easily click into because I'm always having ideas. I'll be at the grocery store and I'll be like, oh my gosh, the music should cut out there. Or, oh wait, I think I saw some shot buried deep in my string out that Scott grabbed like at the very end of a shoot. I'm like, oh my gosh, shot's the solution. Next time I open up my edit suite, I'm going to go grab it and throw it in to this part of the commercial and export that as a B cut option. So it's really fun to think of editing in this way, to be unleashed creatively away from your software.
And I was going to say, Austin, that it's very, it feels really good as a director to know that you're thinking about that shot, or you think of that shot I got at the end of the day, that you took the time to really almost put that footage in your unconscious mind so you could think of that solution when you're at the grocery store.
Wow.
That's what
Yeah.
we want. We want that kind of. We're so passionate about what we do, we can't help but think about it when we're off hours. So I'm grateful to you for being that sort of dialed in to the mission of creating this piece and making it as good as it can be based on the footage that we got.
Oh, that's so kind of you. And I'm just going to throw this in as a bonus tip, um, because it's so important and it wasn't on my original list. But having an intimate knowledge of the footage, I think, is so overlooked. And it's something I needed to get better at throughout my career. And it's something I still want to get better at now. I think when I first started, I didn't appreciate what it really means to get to know the footage. And as I get older and work on projects, and I've been affirmed by the fact, as I know the footage better, my edits get better. Because really, your knowledge of the footage is really one of your superpowers as an editor. Um, it makes everything better. You have better options. You are able to creative problem solve easier. Um, you are able to edit faster and more efficiently. And when you have a director well, all directors are so passionate about what they shot, it just creates this synergy and exponential collaboration when you both know the footage so well.
And knowing the footage used to be just what happened, because when we used to edit we used to edit linearly, we always
Right.
had on the Steenback on the film, you couldn't just jump to the next shot. You had to go forward or reverse through the footage. You had to see the footage over and over again
Oh, yeah.
as you fast forward or rewound through the film. So it just got in your bones. There was something really cool about seeing the footage over and over again. That little moment after the director called cut maybe is the exact thing you need, but it was never intended to be used as, that reaction shot or whatever. So it's really cool. I'm really grateful to you for getting to know the footage, because it's easy to not get to know the footage. It's easy to watch it
Yep.
once and then just jump around in
Yep.
your non-linear edit system wherever you want to go. So it's kind of a special thing to be intimate with it.
Yeah, so practical tip. What I like to do, you actually make it kind of fun. I like to make it like I'm watching a movie. So I'll put it up. I'll get my timeline all organized beautifully. So I'll have this one big string out. I'll export it or output it to my 4K TV here, and I'll kind of sit back and just be like, you know what? This is just going to be kind of an experience where I don't have to do anything technical. I might write notes on the second time through, but the first time through, I just it's almost like a sacred experience. Like, I'm just going to
Mhm.
watch it. I'm just going to take it all in. I'm just going to notice things, but I'm not going to stress too much about perfectly categorizing or writing my ideas down the first time. But then I'll watch it a whole second time through. And I know some of you are thinking, oh my God, I can never do that. I would never have the time. It will save you so much time in the long run.
You
Make this a
let the
practice.
footage just kind of wash over you,
Yeah.
basically. Like, no
Yep.
judgment, no notes. You just
Yes.
take it in, let it just kind of absorb into your consciousness in a way.
Yep. And then the
That's
second time, I
so
bust
cool.
out my notepad. I'm usually typing. I'm
Yeah.
not much of a pencil and paper guy. But then the second time through, I'm like, ooh, that take right there. That visual was perfect. The camera operator was spot on. The visual performance was killer. I'm gonna mark that. I would probably mark it in my timeline with a marker. And then, that audio performance. Oh my gosh, he said it so good there. That's got to make it into one of my early cuts. Ooh, this is an interesting thing the director got at the end of this sequence. I bet I kind of know what he was going for there. You kind of see, and then as you work with the same people again, there's really this shorthand, because I kind of know what Scott's doing on set because we've worked together so much. I'm like, oh, he's gonna want to see that. And Scott, being the good director he is, the takes usually get better as they go on, which is one sign of a great director. The performances get better and better through the takes.
I will say too, I have a heart for editors, now that we shoot digitally. Back in the day when we shot film, there was limited footage, so it was easier to sit back and watch it all. But if you work with the director, and I do this sometimes where I do these long takes and I do a
Yeah.
series, yeah, I do acknowledge that sitting through the footage can be hard when the director just isn't cutting, or
Yeah. True.
doing like 25 takes. So fair enough, that
Yeah.
it could be. Some people might be listening to this going, well, you don't know the director I work with. He just
Oh,
doesn't
true.
cut. But Austin, are there tricks that you do? Do you kind of, before you watch all the footage, do you chop out the
Yes.
resetting
Yes.
and all that good stuff? Okay, yeah, you
Yes.
do
Thank you.
cut that out. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I watch my string out all the way through. So my first string out.
Got
So,
it.
but I will say, be pretty liberal on how much you leave in there, because
Right.
shots that were shot before Scott said action and after he said cut have made it into broadcast commercials.
Oh yeah.
So when the camera's rolling, that's fair game. So as an editor, you got to be willing. You got to at least know you have to have your bearings. So I usually, put a little bit of head, a little bit of tail, and I'm kind of scrubbing through, cuz you might see, cuz shooting is so hard, and I have a heart for that now cuz I do go to set, and that's actually really helped my attitude as an editor. Shooting's so hard. You have 60 people standing around all making a pretty decent day rate, all this money being spent, huge production design. You got a crane, you got an Ari Alexa, on Scott's shoots. You have all these people there. They might just need to point the camera at something and get it at the tail end when they haven't cut, the audio's not in sync, but they just got to get it. So I have a lot of flexibility, and I get to sit in my air conditioned office. Nobody's bothering me, and I appreciate that. And so I can just go through, chop everything up, find all the pieces. I spend a good amount of time making this beautifully organized string out where it's just like buttoned up. And that's usually what I watch from beginning to end. So if it's a 30-second commercial, it's usually 30 to 45 minutes of stuff. And so I'm thankful that I do edit this short form stuff. So when I'm talking about watching all the footage on a commercial, even if I watch through it twice, that's only an hour and a half. I do
And
realize it's different if you organize all your footage and it's 8 hours, you're in a little bit of a different position. It also depends on your deadlines. But when you can, get as familiar with the footage as possible.
Austin, just a side note on the string out. Do you put the last take first in that string out that you watch, or do you watch from first take to last?
I watch the last take first. So I go through the little bit of extra administrative effort to watch the last takes first. And the reason I do that is, like I said earlier, they're usually better because we have to put yourself in the mind of a director, and Scott can speak to this since he is a fabulous director. The director decides to move on when they've got something they're happy with, usually. And also the actors, especially with a good director, they're getting more comfortable and they're getting direction that's getting the result that the director wants. So typically, not always, the best performances are near the end or close to the end. A lot of times with Scott, he'll get something he really likes and then he might do something bonus or do a safety. So it's not always the very last take. And the reason I go through the trouble of putting those first is because I actually like my first impression to be what Scott had in mind rather than the opposite. I really like seeing that first thing where it's kind of in the ballpark a little bit. Especially, you also think about the camera operator and the DP. They might be fixing the lights toward the beginning of the take. But when I start with the last take, it's really kind of a beautiful representation of kind of what everybody thought on set was good enough in the can to where they can move on.
I think that's really smart that you do that, Austin, because yeah, then you kind of you're more in touch with the intention of the director. And, the first takes are, a lot of times we don't rehearse. So, and a lot
That's
of
right.
actors don't want to rehearse. They just want it to happen, on
Yeah.
set. They want to find
Hmm.
it. They want to be in the moment. They want to react. And those first takes are basically we're shooting the rehearsal. And the camera
Exactly.
movement's not right. So, things are kind of bumpy. Like you mentioned, the DP's still working on the lighting a little bit. And, it's very common to do, I was on a shoot with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. I wasn't directing, someone else was directing, but I had my students on set, and they were watching. They were so shocked that 10 to 15 takes were done, but that's very common. And in fact, that's not that many takes. Matthew was talking about how, yeah, we actually didn't do that many takes, like 12
Yeah.
to 15 was kind of not that many. So there's a lot of takes. So you get a little, when you watch them back to back, they almost start to all feel the same. But when you watch
Yeah.
from the end take to the first takes, you see how they almost degenerate. They
Yeah,
almost get less
exactly.
good. And you're
Oh,
like,
they
oh,
do.
I see what they fixed. I see what Scott was going for. He fixed that performance there. He kind of, you see it's like a sculpture done in reverse, because
Yes.
when you're on set, you're in real time sculpting a performance, sculpting the shot composition. Maybe art department will make a change to the background. You'll sculpt the camera movement and the focus pull, and you'll get a little better and a little better. And you'll really notice how it kind of falls apart as you
Yeah.
go from the later takes to the earlier. So I think that's an interesting, unique practice that you do, Austen. I don't know how many other editors do that.
Yeah.
I'll
Comment below if
comment
you
that is.
watch Last Takes first. And if you try it, tell me what you think. And since we're talking about string outs and timelines, I want to talk about this, which is, okay, I'm sitting at my edit suite. I've got my string out. I've watched through it the first time. Now I'm taking notes on the different takes. Here's something I wish I knew sooner. I am taking notes on my favorite visual takes. So let's say there's 2 lines these actors are saying in this setup. I'm taking notes on the best visual takes, when the DP nailed it, the camera move, the actors visually were just so believable and authentic. But then I'm also taking a note of the best audio takes, knowing that often I am going to combine the audio from one take with the visual of another take. And as an experienced editor of 20 years, I think my younger self would be shocked at how often the audio came from a different take than the visual, and how often Scott and I are just finding the little pieces from all over and just crafting it into this perfect performance. So can you speak to that, Scott? I know that's something we're always doing. Even a
Yeah.
different word, one
Yeah.
word from one take. So it might be
Yeah.
multiple audio takes put
Yep.
into one visual.
Yeah, and that's what professional editors do. And I think young editors don't realize how much manipulation goes into the performance, especially on commercials, because you're dealing with shorter lines. Usually,
Yeah.
those lines from other takes can sync up just fine. But it's funny, sometimes they don't 100% sync up, but it's worth going
Yeah.
with the better audio performance.
Yep.
Especially, what I've learned over the years is if it syncs up at the end of the line, you're
Oh,
good,
yep.
and people tend to
So
accept it.
true, man.
So the beginning of the line can be a little off, but as long as you nail the ending, you're kind of good. But I mean, it's so key. And I edited a feature once, Austin. I remember this is just kind of a comment in regards to performance of actor portrayals and performance. The director thought one of the actors did a very poor job. And after 3 months of me editing the film and working really hard on her performance, this particular actor's performance, to really like dial it in the editing room, he thought she had the best performance. There was
Oh, yeah.
something about what she gave us that actually, like at first blanch, was not good, but she actually gave us everything we needed to make her character really pop and to make her performance fantastic and
Yes.
understated in a lot of ways. And so I think that, yeah, just realizing it's just the magic of movies, baby. That
Yeah.
audio and picture are separate, and you can combine audio with picture from different takes, and we do that a ton. And also in Austen, you can speak to this. We'll create whole string outs where we're just focused on the audio performance, and we'll make notes
Yep.
like, here's our first favorite audio performance. Here's our second
Mm-hmm.
favorite. Here's our third. Okay, now let's take these three options, put it against picture. Which one has
Yes.
which one is the magic combination? And you can't predict it. You can't just listen to the audio and go, oh, this one's
Oh
definitely going to
no.
work best. You got to put it with picture, and then there'll be some kind of magical thing
Yep.
that happens, like this voice performance with this picture performance combined with what happens the reaction shot is suddenly funny or hilarious, and you
Yep.
can't predict that until you execute it. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you brought that up.
And I'll say one anecdote of a commercial we worked on last year, and I won't say what it is, but and I was on set. I like to be on set when I can. I do feel like it gives me a leg up in the editing room. And on set, there was an actor who was really struggling. And so much so that the client from the ad agency, you could tell they were a little bit worried. We get into the editing room. We're going through take after take. Maybe there's 20 takes. Maybe there's, 20 takes of each line. And there was one time the actor said it, and it was perfect. Out of all these terrible takes. And that's kind of what's in your head on set. You're like, "Oh no, this is failing." This is the beauty of
Yeah.
editing. And one of the things I love about editing, because you just don't have to show the failures. And when you find that one time she said it right, and you put them back to back, and you make this commercial, it ended up being one of the best commercials of the batch.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks it's great. She's being applauded. I'm happy. The director's happy. The client's happy. And it's the magic of editing. That's why you
Yeah.
do 20 takes. You don't have to show the
Yeah.
19 where you didn't do a great job. I
Yeah.
just get so much satisfaction about trying to, make everybody look as good as possible. And when it works, it's like, hey, she did her job, right? She gave us what we needed.
Yep.
And that's all you have to do, because acting is so hard, to be
Yeah.
vulnerable, to go there when there's like 40 people standing around. And at the
Mhm.
end of the day, she gave me what I needed. But it's
Yeah.
on me. I have to go dig for that and make everybody look as good as possible. And it's really one of my favorite parts about editing, I think.
And here's the other funny thing I'll say that's kind of related to that is, as a director, we can't help but judge what's going on in front of the camera sometimes, because
Yeah.
we have to decide, do we
Oh,
have
yeah.
it? Can I move on? Do I have all the variety I need? And it does happen where that line reading that I was like kind of dismissed early in the takes, I'm like, yeah, no,
Oh,
I
true.
don't think that's it. That ends up being the one. That ends up
Oh,
being the
yeah.
one that was right. So
Absolutely.
you kind of just never know. It's just
Yep.
good to get variety, and trained
Yeah.
actors know to always give it something different, because they know the
Yes.
editor needs a little different color here, a different variation here, a little different intonation here. And trained actors will give you a lot of options. The problem is you're working with an untrained actor. They'll do it the same every time for 20 takes, and then they'll accidentally do it
Yeah.
different once. And it's that one
Yes.
time that kind of saved you. And that's really fantastic, where they just got a little tired and they just kind of got thrown off, or they were given a direction that took them a different direction. And thank goodness they did a little bit different, because oftentimes that is the one.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who was started as an assistant editor in New York City, and he was working on a feature film with starring Meryl Streep. And he told me this anecdote. So he's there, he's the head assistant, and he's getting these Meryl Streep dailies. And he's like, come on, everybody, all the interns gather around, come sit down. And he said they press play, and it's just like a master class. She gave 5 incredible options, one after another, all different, all usable. And it's basically like she says, here's 5 options. Use whichever one you think works best, but I'm giving you 5 incredible options. And that's just another level, man. When you get an actor who can pull that off and give you authentic performance one after another, but all these different options, that must have been an editor's dream.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and McConaughey says this. He comes in with like 4 versions of the truth. That's how he puts it.
Oh,
And
that's so cool.
he'll have an idea. He'll say, "Well, the scene could go this way. It could be that way. It could be this way or that way." But they all have to be truthful. They can't just be
Yeah.
different. They have to be truthful and authentic, like you just mentioned. That's key, and that is. I mean, that's real professionalism. It takes years to kind of get to that level of craft.
Yeah, man. Okay. That's great. So I want to go, since we talked about using audio from different takes, combining it with different visuals, I wanted to talk about another trick that Scott and I use all the time, and I wish I was well versed in it sooner. And that's the beauty and art of using split screens. So Scott, do you want to explain what this is, and I'll add to it?
Yeah. So when, I noticed when I started editing, non-linearly and I had more control, and I could do little kind of magic tricks, as you might call them,
Yeah.
in
It does
editing
feel like that.
software. It is a total magic trick. It's back to the magic of cinema, where, for example, if the camera doesn't move and you have a character here talking and you have a character here talking, you have these different performances. Well, you have the same performance in the same take, but if you like one take where this person's perfect and then a different take where this person's perfect, just split screen it down the middle. As long as that camera didn't move, you can combine the two performances.
Yeah.
And I think, there are purists maybe who just think, oh, I would never do that. Or, someone who just wouldn't think to do it. But you do whatever is in your toolbox to make the thing you're making as great as it can be. And I just love that simple
Oh yeah,
split
dude.
screen technique. It's incredible. I've seen you use it to,
Yeah.
adjust comedic timing and stuff. It's so valuable.
Yeah, I think we were working on, you shot a really funny insurance commercial with Brett Favre, and I love how you shoot. You shoot a lot of times with a static camera, which actually can really add to the comedy because it doesn't distract from the joke, which is really nice.
Right.
I like it. But it was Brett Favre talking to this insurance agent, and we were kind of struggling because Brett Favre gave his funniest reads in one take, and the insurance agent gave his funniest reads. And I was like, you know what, man? They're not overlapping.
Yeah.
I did a split screen, add a little blur to line them up. And not only could I pick the best take of Favre and the best take of the insurance guy, the actor playing the insurance guy, who was incredibly funny. Not only could I pick their best takes, but then I could line them up in a way. I trimmed just a few frames out of the middle, so the guy replied to Brett Favre just a little bit faster. And those little frames and that split screen were the difference of that part of the spot working or not.
Yeah.
And that's just, like you said, it's magic. And I love when moments happen like that because editing is problem solving. And to have all these tools at your disposal it's the best. So again, this is a public service announcement. If you don't already do this and you're a young editor, start bringing these things into your editing, and you're going to find solutions for the director you're working with, the producer you're working with. It's going to blow their mind, and just add it to your toolbox.
Yeah, it's like, don't take the footage at face value. Go
Yep,
go the extra mile. Use those little tricks of the trade to make it as good as it can possibly be.
Awesome. Okay, so those were a couple technical tips. I want to talk about rough cuts, Scott, and I'm going to start with a pretty funny story from our background. So Scott and I have been working together for over 20 years. So I was probably 19 or 20. Scott was maybe 30, 32. He had just gotten his master's degree at the University of Texas at Austin. I was an undergrad. And I actually took Scott's class in over 20 years, or about 20 years ago, or a little over. And I worked so hard on the film I made in that class. I really wanted to be an editor at that point. I was directing this short film. I slaved over this edit. I killed myself. All the other college kids, they went on their spring break. I was working 18 hours a day on my little laptop with Final Cut Pro on this rough cut, right? Whatever the first cut is, it's the rough cut. But I was just going crazy by myself, alone. And I was finally ready to show it to my professor, Professor Scott Rice. And he comes in and I play it and he watches it and he goes, that's pretty good for a rough cut. And my heart sank because I don't know how many hours I worked on it. I think probably 100. And now looking back, it's hilarious because what I know now is that rough cuts suck because you're working on it in a vacuum. And until you show it to somebody, it's a rough cut. There's always going to be ways to make it better. And I think, Scott, the longer you work on something without showing it, the more you're kind of in this vacuum and you're like losing your bearings almost. So now my advice is, what I wish I had known sooner is that rough cut, just get it out and show it to your collaborator or somebody you trust as soon as possible and feel out where you are and then dive back in. Then you're creating your second pass, which is such a better way to do it. Tell me about that. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and I remember I was even being a little bit generous by saying it's pretty good for a rough cut because of course
it actually sucks.
You're the student, I'm the professor. I come in and I'm like, okay, but I'm trying to be encouraging. But what I could tell was you were going to have a great movie. I could see it in the footage.
True, there was
so
potential.
then I started, and then I just started giving a million notes. Yes. So you did what you needed to do. You got it done, and you're right. The mistake of young editors is they think the rough cut is actually good, and they think it's almost done. And that's the problem. Yes. It's better to just acknowledge, and professionals do this, that the rough cut sucks. I'm just gonna rip off the Band-Aid, and I'm gonna show it to someone before I waste all this time going down these wrong roads trying to polish something that's not ready. You're not ready to go to the fine cut stage because you start working on where what frame all the cuts come on. You're getting way ahead of yourself. You gotta act one problem and you gotta move this whole scene all the way to act two and you gotta cut this character from the scene. That's a lot of work that makes all the, what frame do I cut on irrelevant.
Yeah,
so don't waste your time.
I probably spent days fiddling with stuff that didn't even make it into the final movie.
Right.
How much time did I waste? How much mental anguish? So it's really, editing is not unlike any art. A writer with a blank page, a painter with a blank canvas. I had one painter friend told me the first trial, he calls it attacking the white. Get rid of all that white on the canvas. It's stressful. It's like, get rid of all that blank area on the timeline. It's stressful. Just get in there, put it together, and then you'll move on. But you got to have that mindset shift. Have a mindset shift where you know you're going to find it way later. You're going to put in the hard work to make it great. So, Scott, tell me what a director wants to see in a rough cut. Because although we're admitting that rough cuts suck, but there's a way to make a rough cut that is most pleasing to a collaborator, I think. So what would that be for you?
The director wants to see the script. The director doesn't want you to take liberties yet with cutting out things that don't work or removing scenes or removing jokes or, you gotta let it be what it is in the script so the director can see what works or doesn't work. And I know this because I made the mistake when I worked with a director and I was the editor. It was on a feature film. Julie Bowen was in this movie, and she was kind of like Meryl Streep. She was comedic genius, giving all these different variations of her performance. But in my rough cut of the movie, I thought I was so smart. I'm going to just show the director what he did wrong, and I'm just going to cut out the stuff that didn't work, and I'm going to cut out jokes, and I'm going to rearrange scenes and all this stuff. And the director's reaction was, hey, yeah, good job. Thank you for doing this rough cut, but put in all that stuff that you cut out. Yep. I need to see it to determine if it stays or goes. That's the director's decision, not yours yet.
Yep.
And so I made that mistake. So it's good and legitimate to do, like, for example, a rough cut of a commercial. You might as well just make it what the boards were, for example. Yep. And the directors I just saw working most recently, Speck and Gordon, Will Speck and Josh Gordon, their directing team, they literally have an assistant who's an editor who has taken the storyboards, turned them into an animatic, and as they shoot shots on set, she just plugs the shots that they actually shot into the animatic, and then they just double check the timing and stuff. They're literally just recreating the storyboards with the shots. That's what you do in the rough cut. Now you might say, we need to, think outside the box and rearrange some shots and change some things based on, what's working, because there is a transformation between the script and when you shoot it. It is a totally different animal, but whatever that new thing is, you'll discover in subsequent edits. You won't necessarily discover that in the rough cut.
Yes. So I'll add a couple things. One process that I found that works really well for me is I'll make that first rough cut that matches the boards, but then I just have a spot for my own personal notes of things I think I want to try, okay? So I'm not stunting my own creativity. I'm logging all the things that come to mind. So I got my little doc over here, right? Send off the first rough cut. I get notes back from the director or producer, whoever the client is. And then I focus on their notes. But then I create a B cut. So this is when I start to introduce some of those big ideas I had. So I've made it as scripted. I've gotten their notes. I want to execute their notes exactly like they asked me to. That's a common theme, right? We want to give them what they expect. But then I say, hey, I had these couple other ideas. So I made a B cut. Maybe I make a B and a C. And I say, hey, watch these three things. The A cut is how I executed your notes. But then I kind of had these other kind of crazy ideas. Give them a watch. Tell me what you think. And I found that's a real nice way to get kind of the creative juices flowing, where the collaborator, it feels more like a team effort. It feels like you respect their ideas and you understand that you have a boss and it's their vision at the end of the day. But then you're adding those creative things, and sometimes the stuff I present, it doesn't work. And it's like, oh, well, that's cool, but I kind of like the original direction. I'm like, great. Sometimes you find something really cool in a B and C, or it leads to another idea that was kind of new that you hadn't even thought of in the B and the C. And I think Scott and I work that way a lot. And that's been a really fun way to collaborate.
Yeah, a cool, open-minded collaborator will put their ego to the side and say, and most really experienced professionals are this way, we'll say, oh, I love your C, actually. Do that. It's totally different from what we wrote. It's that one line we improvised that we weren't sure about, but actually that works best. Keep going that direction. So it's good to be vulnerable and present that and not get bent out of shape when they say, no, actually C didn't work. It's okay. It's all the creative process. And we're all putting our egos aside and we're just kind of doing what's best for the piece itself.
Nice. And I'm going to transition. This has to do with rough cuts, but then I want to expound on it even more. And it's one of Scott and I's favorite topics. It's sound design. So when you put together that first rough cut, I'm just going to tell you now, the visual cuts are likely not going to be what bumps your viewer or frustrates them or makes them feel like it's not polished. It's almost always the sound. So as you're attacking that timeline and getting that first rough cut out quickly, not slaving over it, do that, but then also take a detailed sound design pass. I think editors, in our haste, we can forget, especially as a beginner. I think when I was a beginner, I didn't realize this. That's why I want to instill this into people just starting out. Work on that sound design, even at the rough cut. Make sure you put in the sounds that are part of the story and are necessary for the story. Make sure there's fades on all the dialogue. Your cut might be great, but if I hear pops and clicks while I'm watching it, I'm just automatically going to think it's bad. Level it out so the dialogue kind of sounds like a mix. Put in that music, that temp music track, because you think there's going to be music in there. Build out some of the ambiance and really make that, even your initial sound design pass, pleasing to watch. It's going to make the rest of the collaboration go so much smoother. So Scott, I know I'm preaching to the choir with you on sound design, but talk about it in terms of the rough cut, and then we can just talk about sound design in general and how it's like more than half of editing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love that you brought it up because, one thing I want to remind people of is what we're calling the rough cut is not even the first cut. So there's there's an assembly, there's an internal rough cut, there's an internal rough cut number 3, 4, 5, 6. The rough cut that you then show the agency or the director or the client, that's the official rough cut. But that's what you're saying, that rough cut that somebody looks at has to be buttoned up in terms of the sound, because they can't even process. Like I, as a director, I can watch a rough cut and know it's a rough cut, but even I don't know if the picture cuts are working if the ambience drops out and then drops back in, and then there's a pop, and then one voice is really high and then one voice is really low. I can't even hear it. I'm just totally distracted. I'm not in the story,
Yeah.
And you're totally correct that a sign of a young, inexperienced editor is an editor that presents a rough cut to the director, to me. But there's all these rough sound. It's like, how hard is it to just turn it up a little bit, turn it down a little bit, lay in some of the tone that we recorded for the express purpose of covering up this empty spot. It's there so that the rough cut can be watchable and not utterly distracting, and not just distracting, but depressing, because rough cuts, because we talked about over and over how much they suck. They're sucky for you to show. They're also sucky for the director to watch, the producer to watch, because there is this kind of sinking feeling of, it sucks. So the less you can, the more you can make that experience not as gut-wrenching as it naturally is going to be, the better. And audio is a big part of that. Temp music, having a decent sound transition. So we sort of feel like there's some kind of smooth transition to the next scene, all that good stuff.
Yep. You wanna make them. So I stand by it. They're gonna suck because it's a collaborative process, and editing is re-editing, just like the first draft of a script sucks. However, you want to make it. You want them to see it and realize the potential of it.
Right.
Get excited about the potential, because they all know there's going to be 10 versions down the road where everything starts to pop. Kind of we always talk about, Scott, the cumulative effect of all our little tweaks over time. That's what really makes stuff great. But for that first cut, you don't want to distract. And audio is the thing that will kill you in terms of bumping people, distracting them, and kind of leaving them in a bad mood. And that's a bad way to start. That's a bad way to kick off the project. So while I encourage you to quickly get it out, I'm also saying, take a big sound design pass. Make it sound pretty good. That'll serve you. That'll be a good use of your time.
And in Austen, just anecdotally on the commercial side, when we send a rough cut to the agency, And it's not a true rough cut, actually. It's
No,
something
that's a little
different.
different.
We call it a rough cut, but it's really very buttoned up and very polished. It's sort of
Yeah.
like what we think is the best version of the spot, based on the amount of time we had. Usually we don't have a lot of time to create it, so it's not as perfect as we would want it to be. It's still rough in some respects, but it's extremely watchable, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And it's as good as it can be, because we don't want the client to lose confidence that their campaign is in the right hands.
Oh my gosh.
So
that
we
really
do
is
our
so
best.
true.
Yeah.
That's really true with every client. It's particularly with commercials and ad agencies. But man, that is such a good point, Scott. First impressions are so important. Yeah. And here's what happens when it goes sour. Here's how it can go sour. You send something too rough. Let's say you didn't do the sound design pass I talked about. So I get this cut. There's all these pops. The dialogue levels are all messed up. Maybe there's a frame of black that pops in. Various things that can go wrong. Then I, as the client, I lose faith because I'm like, uh-oh. My expectations of quality are not the same as the person I've hired. Then I get scared and I overcompensate. And I do the worst thing a client can do, I think, and I don't want to do this, is micromanage or overcompensate with notes because I think I have to go in and save it. Contrast that when I get something sent from me from an experienced pro, and it's this first thing I'm seeing, and the story kind of makes sense, and the audio sounds pretty good. Yeah, it's rough. It's a first cut. But I'm gonna realize I'm in great hands, and I'm gonna give very few notes. I'm like, hey, maybe shorten that first shot, or well, we kind of wanted to go to the art card here. That's gonna be a couple seconds longer when we get the final VO. Or, I have some color notes for later. I know you guys aren't doing the color, but stuff like that. That's kind of the difference between a good first impression and then how it could go sour.
It when you start getting like dozens of highly prescriptive notes, like use that other take here, cut to here in 3 seconds, blah, 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 on and on, micromanaging the cut, you've killed the creative process. Suddenly the editor can't just try new things to elevate it way beyond the rough cut. Suddenly all your time goes into doing all those tiny prescriptive notes because you have to do them now because your client told you to do them. So you got to do them, and that's going to eat up all your time. And you know what? A lot of those prescriptive notes aren't going to work because the client tried to solve something with a prescriptive note that wasn't really the problem. The problem was that pop on the audio soundtrack, which didn't make that picture cut work.
Yeah.
But the client thought the picture cut didn't work. So they gave you a picture note when really you just shouldn't have had that pop in there.
I want to just hop in with a piece of practical advice that's really helped me with this. And I'm embarrassed. I wish I would have done this way earlier in my career. I've made all the mistakes I'm talking about. So I'm including myself, and I'm trying to save you from the same mistakes. Now that I'm old, I've been doing this for a couple decades. I never make my final export like this thing I do at the end of the day when I'm tired or when I'm frustrated or when I want to be done with something. I treat that as sort of a sacred moment where I'm like, okay, I kind of put myself in the client's shoes, and I still make mistakes. I still absolutely send stuff with mistakes. It's impossible to avoid. But I really take quality control seriously. I imagine I'm the client, because I'm also sometimes I am the client, so I have empathy for it. So I export it. I actually upload it I want to quality control it in the exact situation that I'm going to send it. So I'll upload it to Frame.io. I'll put my headphones in. I'll sit there and focus. I'll watch the whole thing all the way through. And I'll catch Ooh, a frame of black. Ooh, that audio transition bumped me. It's certainly going to bump the client. Oh, you know what? My fade of the music at the end didn't match the picture. I'll go back into Premiere. I'll make those fixes. I'll export another one. I'll upload that one to Frame.io. Guess what? I watched that one all the way through. So the thing I send
Man,
is really has my stamp of approval. I separate it from the frustration. Try to separate it from being tired. And this is just part of, as you get older, you try to do things to a certain level. And that's one practical way. I wish I would have implemented a process like that. Like I would have written it down on a Post-it note, stuck it on my monitor. This is how to QC something. Because it's going to save you so much turmoil later.
there's something psychologically different about when you watch it in its final form, let's say on Frame.io, exported, than when you watch it in your editing software. You almost don't
Yeah.
notice the mistakes. And it's the same reason I think I have. It's similarly on the writing side. When I write a script, I get out a final draft,
Yeah.
because I don't see the typos and I don't see the missed opportunities and stuff. I print it out and I read it on an actual hard copy, and then I see it in a different light. And it's okay, and then I make notes and stuff, kind of like what you do, Austin, on the editing side. And we all just have to remember and not get discouraged that each iteration, like I've printed out that script, I don't know, 100 times.
Oh, more than that. Yeah.
And rewritten it, that it's an iterative process, that it takes time. Like you mentioned, writing is rewriting, editing is re-editing. It's pass after pass after pass. And, on the short film that we just made, Austin, how many cuts were there before we picture locked?
My gosh. Yeah, we were on sequence 150. And I think we posted officially, I don't know how many rough cuts.
Yeah. So, 150 sequences, that's what it took to get it to that place where it was finished. And I think young editors are like, oh, yeah, I'll probably take 4 passes and it'll be done.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, professionals know that it takes revision after revision after revision. Writers know that. Editors know that. You have to trust the process, that it's a messy process, that you will export something and you'll be like, oh man, I still haven't solved it yet. I haven't made it as good as it can be yet, but you did make it a little better, and sometimes you might take a couple steps back. That could happen because you tried something that didn't work, but now okay, that didn't work. I'm going to try another solution. You just have to trust the process. It's a difficult, long, arduous process. We're not geniuses who just know the solution. Everyone will tell, every creative, whether you're an agency creative director or a director or a cinematographer, they'll all tell you that it takes time to find it. And it's particularly true in editing. So don't get discouraged.
Don't get discouraged. I actually like to say, I think there's countless editors out there who probably are way more, or are for sure, so much more talented than me. They just stop 25 versions before me, Yeah. It's like, at some point, it's just like, if you're willing to go the distance, your final product is just going to be better. There's no way around it. And circling all the way back to the beginning where I showed you my rough cut and I was like, look at my rough cut. I really thought in my heart that I was just going to make some minor adjustments and be done. But then 20 cuts later, it turned into this cool little short film. And then that experience showed me, the stuff that ends up being good, this is really hard. And the sooner you can internalize that as an editor, the more success you're going to have in your career. Because this stuff, to make something good, is just really hard. And I know Scott knows that.
Well, in Austin, I really got to give you props on that particular film. It was a comedy. And, for a comedy to work, it has to get big laughs. And when that thing showed at the end of the semester, in front of a big audience. I mean, Austen had basically enthralled this room of 500 people, and they all went nuts laughing. It was as funny as, the funniest Hollywood movie comedy. It was amazing. It was truly remarkable how delighted the audience was, because Austen, as a young editor and filmmaker, went the distance to make it great. Basically trusted, in this case, his professor,
Yeah.
and took
Thank you,
the
Scott.
notes, listened to the notes, and said, hey, maybe I don't know everything yet. I'm going to be humble. I'm going to listen. I'm not going to get offended when I get another 50 notes when I thought
Yep.
we were, almost close to picture lock. There's something about humbling yourself and listening to your audience. That's what George Lucas did on Star Wars. He just
Oh,
kept
yeah.
making it better, kept making it better. Everyone kept sassing it and saying it's not good enough. It doesn't make sense. It's bad. And he just kept making it better and better. And Austen, you didn't do anything wrong when you had a rough cut that you thought was almost finished.
Right.
You were just young. You were just
True.
inexperienced. You didn't understand how the process works yet.
Yeah.
That's
I didn't
it.
know.
That's it. You just
True.
didn't know yet. You were just, you just needed to be shown the ropes, and that's okay.
Yeah. And that's what we want to do with you out there. If you're starting as an editor, wherever you are in your journey, a lot of these things apply. And because there's less opportunity these days to have an in-person mentor, that's why we're making this video, is we want to give you some advice that you can take into your editing and have some shortcuts so you can get ahead of us. I want you, when you're starting out, to get way ahead of where I was, because it's taken me 20 years to be a reasonably okay editor, even though Scott's very kind. But we love this stuff. So I think that's a good place to end. So I just want to thank Scott so much for joining me today and sharing his wisdom. And thank you for the journey of the past 20 years where we kind of learned a lot of this stuff as we went on. And for those of you out there, if you like content like this, you might like my free editing guide, which you can download at the link in the description. And if you like this video, you should watch this one next. Happy editing.